Okay, this is the vocabulary lecture for lesson 14. And we have our 3 vocabulary words here. And we'll be talking about space and atmospheric perspective, and I'll be talking about this picture right here on this page. Then 3-point perspective, I'll be referring to things on this page and this diagram here specifically. In addition to the vocabulary and what's on these 2 pages, we'll also be talking about circles in 1-point perspective and circles in 2-point perspective. So let's go back to this picture and talk about space a little bit. Space in this term means depth, and the idea is you're trying to get a deep space through value contrast. And so you'll see things that are darker in the foreground, and when they overlap, create an illusion of space between these 2 objects and between this object and this background, and this object and this background. And so the idea of space you learned about in when you were doing your charcoal still life, and we talked about that with overlapping shapes, but we didn't really talk as much about things being darker in the foreground, which is what we want to talk about here. Now this particular drawing here is one of my drawings, and it's a detail done in graphite on Lenox paper. And a lot of these very light passages all back in here were done with a 6H and 4H and 2H pencil. Now there's quite a bit of cross-hatching if you look closely at the picture, and the cross-hatching as opposed to the use of the pencil in a really tight cross-hatch, almost a solid, only creates a value about like this, which you see right here at the tip of my pencil, along this line here and along this line up here, so that you can get quite a range in here of using cross-hatching of wide lines and tight lines using a hard pencil and still get quite a bit of detail. The key to the illusion of space using it in this way is that you don't use a dark or soft pencil in the background. In fact, you just have to divide up your space so that everything in the background is like a 6 or 4H. Everything in the middle ground here, which we've talked about that term before, is maybe done with a 2H and an HB, and then everything in the foreground is done with a 2B or 4B. And in that way, you can use the same drawing techniques, but you'll actually get very good atmospheric perspective. And again, atmospheric perspective just refers to kind of mist or fog, or when you look out on a hazy day, everything that's closer to you is going to look darker and sharper, and everything farther away is going to have a grayed out or lighter effect. Okay, so then let's talk about 3-point perspective. Now you notice in this picture, I'm going to duplicate this particular drawing right here in the middle, and we'll discuss it from that point on. So let's start with this clean piece of paper. And we'll start with an eye line or horizon line. And I'm going to put it in the middle of the paper, and I'll label it. Now, as we've talked about before, in 2-point perspective, your peripheral vision is determined in 2-point perspective by putting the points as far as you can away from each other on the edge of the paper. In that way, you'll get less of a distortion. Now, 3-point perspective will start out either being 3 points above the horizon line or using 3 points below the horizon line. You don't really use all 4 points in 3-point perspective because the transition across the horizon line would have to be a curve. And we'll discuss that in drawing 2. So, first of all, because we talked about 2-point perspective as having a peripheral vision distance by having these far apart, the best way to do 3-point perspective is to use a vertical line in the middle of the paper. Now I'm going to use my vertical line with dashed lines. And the reason I'm doing that is because in the future, or actually in another part 2 or part 3 of this lecture for this lesson, I'll talk about the use of this dashed line and why you need to use that for other reasons. And I just don't want to get it confused with a lot of the other lines I'm putting in here. So let's start out with a below the horizon line. And again, because we use points in two-point perspective as far apart as possible, in order to keep this not distorted, you want to use your third point as far as possible. So I got my third point way down here. Now, if I stay in the center, you start out with a three-point perspective with the closest point. And that's what that little illustration on page 67 talks about. Now, you start with a point. Any point goes to 3 other points. So this is going to go this way. And again, I'm only going to draw a short extension of this because I'm not using a ruler, but I can kind of tell that I'm going all the way over to this point. Now, the next thing, once you get 3 lines, is you decide how long you want them. And I'm going to make mine about this long. Now, when I make them that long, I end up with a point, because those points now have to go somewhere. So this point, just as in two-point perspective, the one on the left is going to go over here to the right. The one on the right is going to go over here to the left. So now you've created the top. These points now go down to this point. So now what you're noticing in three-point perspective is it starts to, as we talked about before, you have foreshortening. Well, yes, things are getting smaller as they go away from you, just like they do in two-point perspective when they go back this way. In three-point, when they go down, or at the top above the horizon line when they go up, they'll also get smaller, as in foreshortening. Again, so if I decided that my line was this long, this is my point. This point has to go to that one. So here's the front shape. This one also goes over to this one, like that. Now, what you're going to notice about this, because I was in the center on this dashed line, my closest point is also the closest corner, and it's a straight line. So let's try something else. So let's try to make one off to the right here. Let's make one right here. So I'm starting with a dot, or a point, for 3 points. So it goes this way, then it goes this way. Again, I'm going over to this point, and then it has to go down to this point. So what the illusion did now all of a sudden is it's, as you watch how this is built, now again, this is the end of this line, so that's a point. And since it's to the left of this point, it's going to go to the right. And since this one's to the right of this point, it's going to go to the left, over to here. So that's going to be about right there is the top. This point has to go down here. This one has to go down here. Now this one goes back up to this point. This one will go up to that point there. So you see what happens here is the lower it is in the picture plane, I see more of the top than this one. Also, as it goes off to the right, you get more of that foreshortening or distorted panel, where these panels or shapes, or I would say planes, are very equal. And you see how this one's starting to get very distorted as it goes off to the right. Well, let's try one on the horizon line up here for a minute. So I'm going to put a point right here, right on the horizon line. Now it's 3-point perspective. This one has to go this way, and it also goes that way, and then it has to go down to the 3rd point. Now it's a straight line because it's on the horizon line, and that's the limit of 3-point perspective below the horizon line. After that, you're above it, and the points will start to go downhill. So since this is the end of my line, I want to go down to here. This is the end of my line. I'm going to go down here, and again, I'm extending it down to this point. If this is the end of my front of my box, then this has to go over here. This one has to go up there. So this, you'll notice this is a box. It's on the eye line on the top, 3-point perspective below the eye line. Now, there you have a limited vision here with 2-point perspective. You also have one with 3-point. But where is it in here? It's this triangle. If you have to connect this dot here and this one with a straight line, this is the entire range of 3-point perspective. You can't draw outside of these lines any more than you could draw outside of these dots in 2-point perspective. Because, see, you can't go out, because now these dots are all related. Now, if you want a bigger triangle, you'd have to move this dot way off the page, probably another 2 feet. And that would drop these lines out, and then you'd get more area, and that's your peripheral vision. Okay, well, what happens when we go over here? Well, let's put a dot right here on the line. Well, you have 3 points, this one, and this one. So this goes this way, about that far, right? It's going to go this way, and I'm just going to go about that far with it. It goes over to here. And then this one goes down to here. Okay, so this is the extent of my box. So this has to go, since it's on the right side of this dot, has to go to the left, up to here. This one's on the left side, it has to go over here. This is your 3rd point. It's going to go down to there. And then your front point has to go up to here. So that's going to go up about like that. So that's all you can see from the end. Once you get past this line, it starts to fold in on itself, because just like if you took a 2-point and went outside of your dots. So this is your range that you have in 3-point perspective. Now let's just do 3. We'll do 3 more from up above. Let's try one right here. Okay, so we go 1 over to there. It's going over here. 1 over here. It's going over to here. Now this one, being on the right side, goes to the left, over to here. The one on the left side goes to the right. Okay, this is your 3rd dot. We're going to put our dot up here, our point, vanishing point. And we had our vanishing points down here too, of course. I'm just going to label all these real quick for you. So this goes up to here. And you know, you can make it as deep as you want. This one goes up here. The thing is this one, which is the front one, or closest to you, point that we started with, so anything on this line has to be what goes to these 2 sides over here, like that. And then this one, as it goes up there, just meets it, and that's what completes that shape. This one has to go up here, and then, of course, this one I already drew over there. So there's that shape. Now, if we put another one on the center again, we can put it right here. We'll make a little one. So 1 point goes this way, 1 goes over here, 1 goes down here. Then this one goes up here. This one would go up to that. This one then goes down to this one down to that one. The one on the right goes to the left. The one on the left goes to the right. So again, this point, closest point, is also the closest corner because you're on the dashed line in the center. And real quick, I can do one more over here. Closest point, it has to go this way to this point, this way to that point, and this way to that point. Then you end up with 3 more points. This one has to go up. This one has to go up. And this one being to the left has to go to the right, over to here. This one being on the right has to go to the left, over here. Let's connect these a little better. Now you start with this one again. This one will have to go to both places. It has to go over there, and it has to go down here. So that's what defines that shape. And that's the basics of 3-point perspective, above and below the horizon line. The important thing, again, I want to stress is that if you're in the center, the closest point is also the closest corner. As soon as you move away from the center, you only have a closest point. You cannot go outside of your triangle because the object will fold in on itself. If you want a larger area, you need these points to be out farther, and you need these points to be up and down farther. But you can't go across this line any more than you can go across this one because you end up with a straight line. After that, yes, you could. If you went up here, you see what happens is this line, if it starts here, ends up going this way, and then this, and I'm just doing this real lightly to show you that it doesn't really work anymore because it's going to keep going wider this way when it shouldn't. It should go narrower, and that's why it'll have to turn a corner right away, which doesn't work. There is ways to do that where it actually becomes a curve, but that's not for this at this time. You just want to try and understand this concept. Okay. So now we're going to talk about circles. Take this down. Okay, let's start out with we'll start out with a horizon line. I'm going to put it up here, just a little above halfway. And I'll label it. Let's see, I'll label it over here. Okay, the first thing that we did in here in lesson 1 was, can you draw a square? Let's draw 4 lines of equal length, 90 degrees from each other is a square. I said if you want to use a ruler and you want to find the middle, this looks like about a little bigger than a 2-inch square. You could mark these like this with a ruler. This is just a flat shape. And once these are in the middle, you can make a circle that only touches that point. We started that in lesson 1.